9.5 million casualties, 21 million wounded. On the 11th of November 1918, the First World War drew to an end with a terrible toll after a conflict unlike anything humanity had ever seen before. For 4 years and 3 months, soldiers from at least 20 countries were plunged into the hell of trenches, caught under a deluge of bombs. Unprecedented violence was displayed in this war, changing the face of the world for decades. A century later, while landscapes in the east of France still carry the scars of the war, remains of the war are still hidden underground, now becoming the objects of investigations by archaeologists. Thanks to new discoveries in computer-generated images and reconstitutions, experts are able to show us the First World War as we have never seen it before. Over the course of excavations, forgotten traces resurface from the past. They give us a glimpse into the organization of combat, the daily lives of soldiers on the front lines, or the strategic use of underground tunnels during battles. The untold stories of soldiers who died or disappeared are told again through the vestiges of the Great War. 100 years later, we are still learning about the horrors of this war, which will be forever engraved in our memory. At the beginning of the 20th century, relationships between the major European powers were very tense. Diplomatic incidents were on the rise. Germany, Austria-Hungary, and the Ottoman Empire were opposed to France, Russia, and Great Britain. Nationalist and territorial claims gained momentum in both camps. On the 28th of June 1914, a specific event served as a trigger. The Austrian Archduke Franz Ferdinand was assassinated in Sarajevo by a young Serbian nationalist. A month later, Austria declared war on Serbia, and within a few weeks, the conflict became global. From 1914 to 1918, the Great War mobilized more than 60 million men. From Russia to the United States, from the Ottoman Empire to the countries in the British Crown, more than 30 nations were involved, and with them, all of their colonies. Most of the battles were fought on European soil, where 4 conflict zones took shape. Among these zones was the Western Front, a line that stretched 650 kilometers from the shores of the North Sea to the Swiss border. During a period of 4 years, both sides faced each other, standing just 10 meters apart on this strip of land. Soldiers buried themselves in the ground to protect themselves from gunfire and bombings. As the months went by, they dug huge networks of trenches. At the end of the war, the traces of this bloody spectacle were quickly concealed, and farmers recovered their land. But the landscapes of eastern France are still marked by the conflict. A century later, large scars are still visible when seen from above. In the Marne region, 65 kilometers east of Reims, a team of enthusiasts has decided to rehabilitate a symbolic site known as the Mans du Massige. These forgotten trenches were dug at the top of a hill overlooking the Aisne Valley, a strategic location, and one of the region's most disputed at the start of the First World War. For the past 4 years, Eric Marchal and his army of volunteers have been excavating a plot of 3 hectares with the objective of restoring the network of trenches used by both camps.
This trench isn't very deep at all. It's about 1 meter 30 deep, meaning that at ground level, there's no more than 45 centimeters of available space. A little larger at the top to allow for shoulders to pass. We mustn't forget that soldiers had big backpacks, their rifle, their belongings. These trenches were very basic, you know. The Germans established themselves 50 or 80 meters away from here. Of course, there was no way for the soldiers who dug these trenches to show their heads or any other part of their body, as they risked getting killed.
The soldiers' daily lives at the beginning of the war were particularly difficult, as we can imagine when looking at the simple architecture of this narrow gallery.
We can well imagine the hardships of life in these trenches. No infrastructures, no protection for the soldiers, a few benches, well, shooting benches to see what was going on above. They simply climbed up to observe the German lines opposite them to see what was going on. We're in trenches that let the rain and the shots come in. Winters were very difficult, very humid, which meant that soldiers were deep in water all the time. When it was freezing, well, of course the men were soaked, so they were also freezing. That is when they started to catch the famous trench foot illness, where their feet were frozen and their feet hurt. And after a while, the pain was so intense that they weren't hurting anymore. It was too late, and the foot had to be amputated. That's what we call trench foot. That's what I thought it was. It's a knife known as a butcher's knife. We can see it. It's a knife with a wooden handle, which of course has disappeared with time, with a rather fine blade and still very sharp. So these were quality knives that were purchased in bulk. Soldiers had these types of knives in different shapes in their jackets or in their bags close by in a leather or cloth sheath. But soldiers rarely used them because many of them said, "We aren't murderers. We don't want to get to the point of fighting in a clinch with knives."
This knife only serves as an example of the many weapons used by members of the French troops. On the excavation site, Eric Marchal and his team also found several rifles with bayonets, and even automatic pistols, given to some soldiers at the beginning of 1915. Apart from weapons, the soldiers left many other traces of their daily lives in the muddy trenches. These precious remains are preserved in a secret location, hidden away from looters and collectors. On the shelves are helmets, fragments of uniforms, personal objects, and even mess kits and tin cans, helping us to imagine what the food was like in the trenches.
During the first year of the war, they didn't eat well at all. There were lots of carbs, lots of rice and potatoes, very little meat. That's why soldiers asked for care packages from parents or family to make their daily life more tolerable, as it has become unbearable. So, here we have a can of sardines that comes from civil society. We can imagine the wife or the parents who sent this to their son or husband. So, that's a can of sardines. Here we have a can of peas that's clearly labeled with the brand Les Progrès, extra fine peas. Of course, these are civilian objects. These food products were very popular, and inside those care packages, in addition, you would find other local delicacies. Sausage or a can of pâté to improve the lives of the soldiers. Chocolate, too.
Small glass phials were included in the French soldiers' military equipment. This was alcohol drunk by the men to keep their spirits up.
We found several equipment kits that were left by soldiers, and we found small glass phials that contain mint alcohol. It's an alcohol that's poured over a sugar cube. A few drops are enough. When it was cold, or when their blood pressure dipped, the soldiers ate the sugar cubes and it gave them a boost. This vial is still full, and we're lucky that we're allowed to open it. We can still smell the mint alcohol, preserved for 100 years with this airtight cap.
Most of these men, condemned to live in the constant fear of bombs, weren't career military men. From 1914 to 1918, more than 8 million French civilians were mobilized. In their kits, they brought mementos of their loved ones and many lucky charms. A large number of ink pots were discovered on excavation sites, showing that soldiers wrote to their families very regularly. Some of these letters survived over time. 100 years later, they immerse us in the terrible hell of the trenches, such as these letters written by the soldier Albert Dadour, who was 20 years old and posted to the Man du Massige in December 1914.
Dear Uncle and Aunt, I'm responding to your letter and card, which I received yesterday evening. When I go to the trenches, I'm there for 2 days and 2 nights at the front line, without lying down or sleeping, and then 2 days on the second line at the edge of the woods. I am only 25 to 50 meters away from the Germans. They wouldn't have taken much of a leap to find us. We can hear them speak. Sometimes they even throw rocks. I swear that yesterday night, when we went to bed, we were stiff as a board, and then there was the mud. Now there's snow every day. I don't know how we could possibly be hurting more than we already are, and how we can resist malnourished, always cold, without even any water to drink. The first few days, some were thawing snow.
Throughout the conflict, thousands of men died directly because of the virtually inhumane living conditions. But at the front, artillery fire and shots still carried the most danger. Like many of his fellow soldiers, Albert Dadour died under German fire on the 7th of February, 1915. Within 4 years, more than 1 billion shells and 55 billion rifle bullets were fired on the Western Front. The First World War was an industrial war, with the two enemy camps rivaling each other in strength. Each day saw a deluge of bombs falling on the men on both sides of the no-man's land. But as bombs assaulted the surface of the battlefield, another war was being conducted in parallel. A buried war, a couple of meters below the surface, known as tunnel warfare. In the department of Meuse, 35 kilometers northwest of Verdun, one place in particular has become the symbol of this surprising military strategy, the Vauquois Hill. The military staff committees from both camps saw this promontory as a strategic location from the outset. The Germans seized it in September 1914, and then the French took hold of it again in March 1914, marking the start of highly violent underground battles. Soldiers dug deep tunnels to reach the enemy front lines. They then placed strong explosives at the end of the tunnels to make the trenches collapse and decimate the enemy troops. But the opposite camp tried to counter these attacks by making the tunnels explode before their completion. This war of tunnels on the Vauquois Hill went on until the fall months of 1918. "100 years later, the site still carries the marks of these terrible battles. Underground, the galleries are almost intact. Traces of pickaxes are still visible on the rock's surface, as if the soldiers only just left. Alain Janesson has been studying this exceptional site for 20 years. He knows every detail of these 22 kilometers of tunnel dug by the soldiers from both camps.
Here, we would be about 50 meters away from the French lines, so there wasn't the threat of being spotted. Drills and pneumatic drills could be used, which made a lot of noise. But as soon as they were less than 20 meters away from the opponent, the work had to be done manually. Everything was done with picks and pickaxes.
The ground was transformed into a vast termite mound. On the German side, a true underground city was carved into the rock, with infrastructures organized on various levels.
The Germans lived underground, up to 10 meters deep. There's the living area, the guard post, the command post, rooms, a kitchen, hospitals. There was even a chapel with several chaplains. So, you see, these are true barracks on the first floor. And at the lower level, up to 20-25 meters deep, that's where the underground war was happening. This is where they set out from to go underneath the French line.
German soldiers stayed up to 4 weeks in this labyrinth of tunnels with their heads down, never seeing the light of day. The French troops never spent the night underground. The galleries were only used to place explosives under enemy lines. In the bowels of the earth, the miners dug relentlessly, as discreetly as possible. They constantly had to listen and try to locate the enemies in order to counter them.
In front of us, we see a geophone. The geophone is basically the same as a doctor's stethoscope. It functions on exactly the same principles. There was a hearing device on each earpiece, and they placed these devices on the rock, on the ground, on the ceiling. They had to feel the same intensity in each ear, indicating that they were going in the right direction. There were several listening posts like this. They then cross-checked their information to locate the enemy very precisely.
The death toll of the Vauquois Hill battle is horrifying. There were 519 explosions, resulting in 15,000 victims. After 1,500 days of war, the top of the hill has been transformed into a lunar landscape full of huge craters. Neither one of the camps succeeded in taking over. The bloody battle finally came to an end on the 26th of September, 1918, with the arrival of the American troops. To this day, an estimated 1,000 soldiers were never found. They rest under the hill's scarred earth, which has become a place of remembrance. When armies weren't managing to gain ground at the surface, tunnel warfare was conducted on several strategic sites all along the Western Front. But more generally, one of the main characteristics of the First World War is that soldiers lived underneath the battlefields. For 4 years, thousands of soldiers from both camps took over underground quarries that dated from the Middle Ages. These quarries were expanded and refurbished. The men spent days, weeks, or even months there. They prepared assaults and could also have a chance to rest, away from the noise of artillery. Today, real treasures can be found in many of those quarries. These remains have survived the test of time, sheltered from light. "40 kilometers northwest of Reims, in the small town of Braine-l'Alleud, the Froidmont Quarry is one of those lesser-known heritage sites.
We can see a trace here. Do you see it?
Yes, there's a groove here, all the way. So why?
Or maybe it's an abutment for the woodwork, you know?
Nails. Gilles Chauvin has been the guardian of this unique place for 25 years. He has always lived nearby, and he used to walk in the Froidmont galleries when he was a teenager. With him is Gilles Prilot, an archaeologist. It is his first time here. His goal is to assess the archaeological value of the quarry.
Oh, here we can feel the decomposed wood beneath our feet.
Yeah,
It's very soft, almost like carpeting.
it does feel like that type of rug.
Oh, yes. The barbed wires are still there. I can see a few bottles over there. It's huge, isn't it? Whoa. What's that? What is it?
There you are, remains of beds.
Yes, that's it.
The wire netting, the wood that rotted, and the nails that held up the shelves.
It's incredible. This means that here
we have a huge bed. It's almost a collective bed. It's enormous.
Okay, so what's left is all of this wire netting that's laid out on wooden frames. The wood is still well preserved. So there are two levels of beds, apparently.
Bunk beds, a few shelves, nails to hang belongings, wooden walls to create more intimate spaces. The analysis of the room reveals that it served as a basic bedroom for approximately 20 soldiers.
What's really surprising, almost surreal, is the state of preservation. Since everything has been preserved, meaning that the wire grid is laid out for beds, the woodwork, there are some leather items that have been preserved and that are on the ground. It's truly extraordinary.
Going through the galleries, the two men discovered several successive dumping sites. Leather shoes, bottles, tools, food scraps. For months, the occupants threw away a large amount of waste. Careful.
Oh yes, there's lots of glass.
Yes, lots of broken glass.
There are lots of shards, lots of glass shards. Oh, a few pottery pieces. So, here's a fragment from a schnapps bottle. We already have a small fragment here. With a bit of luck, it fits. It's really close to this. A classic for schnapps bottles used by the German army.
German remnants, but also British, French, and American remains are scattered on the quarry ground. This proves that fighters from both camps lived here in succession. These men all wanted to permanently mark their presence on the battlefield. They etched their names, sculpted religious signs, and drew faces on the walls. Inscriptions appear everywhere, popping up on the limestone, similar to the cave paintings that hail from the dawn of time. Gilles Chauvin counted more than 1,000 engravings. The majority of these military mementos were left by Americans. And yet, historical accounts show that American soldiers only lived here for 6 weeks at the beginning of 1918. Ned Perry here, Fred J. Brody, Tom said, Company A, 101st Machine Gun Battalion, therefore American.
They're almost propaganda signs, or at least commercial signs that demonstrate American identity, with the representation of Buffalo Bill, for example. Dozens of American Indian profiles, Plains Indians.
En 6 semaines, ils se
In
sont
6
vraiment
weeks,
lâchés.
they went all out.
The preservation of the wood is amazing. The interesting thing is that some areas of this site are truly in their original condition, meaning that the soldiers left these places like that. It is very rare to observe this type of phenomenon on such a large scale. And this intermingling of nationalities, the German occupation, the brief American occupation, the Franco-American one, it's quite surprising with hundreds of these sculptures. It's quite an arresting sight, quite striking. We would definitely benefit if this site became more famous in value, and this place hasn't revealed all of its secrets yet, that's for sure.
The treasures that are contained in the Foimont quarry are invaluable witnesses of the untold underground lives of these soldiers. Here, as in many quarries along the Western Front, the work of identifying and analyzing these sites has only started for archaeologists and historians. 150 kilometers north of Foimont, beneath the pavements of Arras, another tunnel is the focus of all the attention. Arras is one of France's martyred cities. It was almost completely emptied of its inhabitants as early as the August mobilization in August 1914 and was under constant fire. In 1916, the front was passed on to British command. Thousands of men from England and the British colonies arrived in the destroyed town of Arras and occupied cantonment sites. But these men didn't only move in above ground. 20 meters underground, a vast network of quarries was developed. Alain Jacques is the director of the Archaeological Service of Arras. For the past 10 years, he has been studying this topographically complex and sprawling site.
This structure is actually the biggest underground construction ever made by the British Army. Up to 24,000 men could fit in these quarries. Everything was arranged for them, with a medical unit. There was hospital with 700 beds, there were showers, there were latrines, all kinds of accommodations to have the best possible stay in these quarries.
The space is organized similarly to a small town. It's a labyrinth of rooms and tunnels that stretches for 20 kilometers. Once again, analyzing the dumping grounds gives us an idea of the daily lives of these underground men.
Despite the rust, the shapes allow us to see that there are cans of cookies, cans of condensed milk, and containers for water. And also, lots of corned beef cans, which were regularly given to the soldiers. We're also finding many glass bottles for sauces, like Worcester sauce, which is a sweet and sour sauce enjoyed by the British people since the end of the 19th century with the colonization of India. The meats that were given to the soldiers were often tasteless, so the soldiers used sauces to enhance the flavors. That's very typical of the British. They cared about the food they sent to soldiers, so that it could be as close as possible to what could be served in a London pub or a pub in Leeds.
À Londres ou à Leeds.
The traces left of varied food items seem to be of a certain quality, which was not the case for the food served to the French soldiers. Alain Jacques and his colleagues actually discovered surprising luxury products, many bottles of alcohol, and among them, champagne.
We could ask ourselves what a bottle of champagne is doing in a military dump site. But part of the answer is found in the writings of an inhabitant of Arras, who worked in the customs office and who wrote that alcohol, and champagne in particular, had never been drunk more than in the first semester of 1916.
In the depths of the town of Arras, the soldiers of the British Empire adopted an underground lifestyle that was relatively comfortable. It was as if they wanted to make sure they enjoyed life before going to the front lines, and perhaps never coming back. As the collective horrors of warfare continued on the front lines, the soldiers often found refuge behind the front, in resting camps. Every 3 weeks or so, those soldiers who were wounded and those who had survived were sent to rest and to gain strength. These men, fatigued by the intensity of warfare, attempted to live an almost normal life in these camps. In the department of Meuse, 62 kilometers east of Châlons-en-Champagne, archaeologists found the remnants of a German rest camp. Its name, the Bariswald. This base camp was located only 8 kilometers from the front, in the heart of the Argonne forest, and could accommodate up to 3,000 soldiers. It included a hospital, kitchens, stables, and even a movie theater and a tram line. For the last 5 years, a team of researchers, led by the archaeologist Yves Defossé, has been uncovering the remains of the Bariswald.
Oh, there are at least a few horseshoes that are displayed for a stable. It's a good thing and it makes sense. Okay, so there are various different models and different sizes. This one is much smaller, which shows that various horses were used. This one has ice picks at the back of the horseshoe for winter. There's an old mustard gas and toothpaste that's left.
All the objects discovered on the excavation site are brought to the archaeological warehouse at Châlons-en-Champagne, 70 kilometers away. On these shelves, more than 10 cubic meters of objects are preserved with care, sheltered from humidity. Uniforms, shoes, dishes, food scraps. They guard our collective memory and contribute to a better understanding of the history of the camp and its inhabitants.
The resting conditions of the soldiers aren't often described. Their everyday life, how they ate, what they had in their pockets. So we have all these elements that we dig out each year. We have new information on the daily lives of these soldiers. It's almost like civilian life, but under the auspices of the military.
A few years ago, the team made a surprising discovery. Several hundred teeth, as well as medical equipment, were found buried in the ground at the south of the camp.
Thanks to an organizational map of the sector made by the Germans in September 1918, we knew that there was a dentist at the camp, but his location was very vague. In 2010, through on-site investigations, we found the location of 2 dumping pits that were solely used by the dentist to throw out what he no longer needed.
ce dont il n'avait plus besoin dans son activité de soins dentaires.
The waste linked to his job is here, which gives us material proof that basic dental care existed, and mainly consisted of extracting teeth. So we found approximately 400 extracted teeth in both pits. The dentist also provided more complex care, as we found a form of plastiline to make dental molds. This is a practice that's very similar to that carried out by today's dentists. We also found Novocaine capsules, a product that is still used today to desensitize patients.
On the front line, the hygiene conditions were particularly difficult. A simple cavity could quickly turn into a painful dental abscess, in turn impairing soldiers in combat. The military commanding officers had to take measures to treat these men, not because they were philanthropists, but because it was an effective war strategy.
A soldier whose teeth were in bad shape wasn't 100% operational, so the original problem had to be solved. That's when we noticed that, concerning teeth, an impressive number of teeth with cavities were extracted. Dental prostheses were also made to allow soldiers to eat as well as possible.
All these elements point to the soldiers having dreadful oral and dental hygiene. Their health was fragile, and this was made worse with the very basic meals they received. Because the Allied forces imposed a blockade on Germany, there was a shortage of raw material. This led the armies to diminish the soldiers' food portions throughout the war. Even behind the front, in the resting camps, living conditions were extremely difficult. But here, at last, the exhausted troops could breathe for a few days, away from the noise of artillery. The many wounded soldiers also needed to be cared for, as they were being evacuated from the front. Unfortunately, medical staff members often felt powerless in the face of a continuous flow of victims and horrendous injuries. Many of the evacuated soldiers died in the health centers. The death toll of the Great War is terrifying. Until the armistice was signed in 1918, more than 21 million soldiers were wounded and 9.5 million were killed on both sides. A century later, the remains of 670,000 soldiers are still in the ground of the old Western Front, forgotten by the outside world. But these missing bodies sometimes resurface over the course of archaeological excavations and studies. Each year, an average of 20 bodies dating back from the First World War are uncovered in this way. In Marseille, the anthropologist Michel Signoli guards the memory of these soldiers. With his team, he is in the process of analyzing 3 skeletons exhumed near Reims a few months ago. 3 men buried together in a common grave, whose stories they now need to piece together. By analyzing the remains of the uniforms, the archaeological team was able to reveal the nationalities and the battalions of the soldiers.
Researchers who specialize in the uniforms of the First World War immediately recognized them as belonging to sergeants, French infantrymen, despite the altered conditions of the remains, having spent 100 years in the ground. The second element is that these soldiers wore what we call puttees, small leather gaiters on their legs. Although this might seem like a mere detail in the soldier's uniform, the puttees are extremely important, since they give a precise idea of when these men died and were buried. In fact, foot soldiers only wore puttees in 1914 and during the first few weeks of 1915.
These men, therefore, lost their lives during the first few months of the war. But who were they? How old were they? How did they die? Specialists meticulously analyzed the bones of the first soldier.
The femur and the full tibia are here. The juncture is here. The fibula is fractured but complete. 1, 2, 3 fractures but complete. The head of the humeral bone is barely joined.
Not very old.
No, not very old. Left and right on both sides. The clavicles aren't joined. So he was clearly younger than 25.
The teeth are another key element. The odontologist Delphine Tardivo searches for clues that could help to indicate the soldier's age and health condition before his death.
The teeth indicate that this person was young. The cusps of the teeth are very clear. The teeth aren't worn. There's no alveoluses, but there are cavities. His wisdom teeth are in place, so I would say around 18 years old.
The expert report concludes that this soldier was the youngest of the three. One of his fellow soldiers was between 25 and 30. The other skeleton showed traces of more advanced dental wear and traces of arthritis on the articulations. For the specialists, this man was probably 40 years old or so. Yann Audargna, an expert in paleopathology, is now looking at each soldier's bone specifics. His aim is to identify possible wounds that could have caused their death.
The entire front side wasn't preserved, so it was probably torn off when it was discovered. However, here's a zone with a pitting depression above the structure of the temporal lobe, about 5 centimeters or 3 centimeters, which could correspond to a tear zone. We could be faced with something that entered the skull and was the cause of the person's death. It's hard to know if it's an entry or an exit wound. So, when we look at the left ilium, there's a point of impact that led to secondary fractures, star-shaped fractures. So here, we can suspect that a piece of shrapnel, a blast, or perhaps a projectile caused the wounds. There are also complex fractures on the right forearm. These fractures occurred on fresh bones, still alive. We call these perimortem fractures, which means they occurred around the time of death. These 3 elements point us towards a violent death, which is to be expected.
These 3 young French soldiers were probably fatally injured by enemy fire. Researchers are confronted with these violent and terrifying deaths each time they analyze a body from the First World War.
Even when we're simply faced with skeletons, we see terrible things. The age of the men is always disturbing. There are so many young people who were under 20 years old. And even though the flesh is gone, we see many pathological traumas on the skeletons, which resulted from artillery fire, shrapnel fragments, blasted limbs, blasted skulls, etc. This period is very different from other time periods and other conflicts, where these traumas weren't as visible or as numerous.
The traces of wounds on the bodies of these 3 infantrymen remind us of the First World War's incredible violence. 100 years later, these soldiers were rescued from oblivion and will soon have a final resting place. The continuing investigations may even allow us to know their true identities one day. Specialists are sometimes able to gather enough clues to reveal the name, body, and face of the soldiers from the remains. Families can then reconnect with the history of their ancestors and finally turn one of the painful pages of their own history.
In August of 1914, I think.
Yes, right. 5th of August, 1914.
Yes, 5th of August, 1914, that's it. Arthur Leguay was consecrated Our Lady of Chartres, and we have the medal.
Geneviève Amouda and Xavier Guita are the granddaughter and the grandnephew of a soldier who was mobilized in 1914 on the Champagne front.
Officer.
Ah, maybe.
Arthur Leguay was the soldier's name. He was second lieutenant in the 2nd Battalion of Light Infantry Men of Massy. Arthur was very fond of his wife and children, and he sent them several letters a week. These letters were carefully preserved through the years.
I'm quickly writing this letter outside, using the light from a candle. It's funny because it's raining outside and a few drops are dotting my paper, which leads me to write askew to avoid ink spots. Everyone is smiling.
My sprained
ankle is almost healed, but I'll be asking for leave in 8 or 15 days.
Goodbye, see you soon, kisses. Those are the last words he penned. What's very moving is the hour and the beginning of the letter, and to see the drops of rain that fell on the 26th of September, 1915. They're still there. It's a double sign of the presence of the dead and the missing. I find it very, very moving.
Three days after having sent this letter, the 2nd Lieutenant Leguay was listed as missing on the front. The commanding officer then sent another letter to the family.
Dear Madam, I would like to share my admiration and that of my officers for the heroic conduct of your husband on the morning of the 30th of September. He fell in front of the batteries, hit by a bullet on his left side. The soldiers saw him sitting, pressing his right hand to the ground. The rest of his body straightened, continuing to shout loudly, "Forward, children, forward."
For 4 long years, Arthur Legay's family lived in doubt. Had he died? Was he held prisoner? Would they see him again? But in December of 1919, all hopes were crushed when they received a death certificate. The story could have ended there, but 97 years after his death, Arthur Legay came back from the past. His body was found on the site of the Mas du Massige, and he was identified thanks to the objects he had with him. These precious remains are now in the hands of Geneviève and her cousin, Xavier.
15th of November, 1878 at Le Mans. This is how the remains were identified. And here are the 2 medals that were sent by his sister. They're in great shape. Hard to believe they were buried in the ground for 97 years. Look, medals.
In October 2012, a grand burial ceremony was organized, and 5 generations gathered to honor the memory of their ancestor, who was finally being remembered. Arthur Legay now rests in the National Necropolis at Pont de Marsan, a few kilometers away from where he lost his life.
Legay. Arthur Charles. I felt moved and peaceful knowing that there was a place where we could pay tribute to him. I also thought of my mom, who would have liked to be here too, to remember him in this place.
We were able to find answers to our questions. Where was he? Where did he die? What did he become? All of a sudden, we know that we found him again. We found his medal, his license plate. He was a missing person who had become known again. He went from being unknown to being known.
And almost alive, I think, because now he's here. He exists. We can come to see him. That's all. He's alive in death.
Along with Arthur Leguet, 21,300 French soldiers rest in the Pont de Marsan necropolis. All along the Western Front, thousands of French, British, Belgian, and German cemeteries and memorials honor the memory of the Great War's victims. Today, it seems that these men died for nothing, sacrificed in the name of a virulent form of nationalism. These 4 bloody years are remembered by archaeologists and historians who study the remnants of the past conflict. Through these studies, the understanding of the war also evolves. The trenches, tunnels, letters, and personal objects remind us of the horrors of battlefields and of the millions of broken families on both sides of the conflict. A century later, the last survivors of the conflict have all disappeared. It is our duty to preserve the memory from this part of our history so that we may never forget the conflict that was thought to be the war to end all wars, but which carried with it the seeds of an even more devastating conflict.